Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today's episode is a cautionary tale type of episode. And usually on these episodes, we go into like a real life, real client story that I or my office we've worked on. Now, it's usually a messy something that's happened that you should learn from. Well, today's a bit different because today is almost like it could have been a cautionary tale had the clients not done what they did, which I get is kind of like the whole purpose of estate planning, to not turn into a cautionary tale. But basically, I just want to talk about this client and their story and their situation because it's so unique, it's so cool, and I'm guessing you may find this topic kind of interesting, especially if you have folks in your life that have divorced or separated, but that they do a really good job at putting their kids first and foremost. So this episode is for that kind of couple, that kind of situation. So let's just dive in, shall we? Let's meet the clients. Their fake names for purposes of this episode are going to be Joe and Natalie. So Joe and Natalie are in their early 40s, and together they have three children: Johnny, Susie, and Frankie. Also fake names. I guess my brain, as I make these names up, just like names that end and sound like E's. But anyway, so about 5 years ago, Joe and Natalie got a divorce. And it was fairly amicable, and honestly, as they put it themselves, they sort of just drifted away. They developed different interests, and as a byproduct, they just mutually wanted to part ways. But it was important to them to be united and protective of the kids and for their kids, and just always put the kids first. Now, I know a lot of people say that, but the story I'm going to share today is them actually putting those words into action, and you'll just see. So a handful of months ago, my office got a call from Natalie, and she's the ex-wife mom. And Natalie shared that her and her ex-husband were wanting to get some estate planning done. And she said, I know it kind of sounds a little strange, but we would like to use the same attorney if possible and even attend the meetings together, like at the same time, if that's possible. Now, we of course do not get this type of request every day. And heck, I can't sit here and think of a single time I've actually ever heard of that in my almost 12 years. So the team member that took the call basically said, Natalie, let me check to make sure that's okay before I schedule something with both of you and kind of take everyone's time unnecessarily if I can't accommodate this request. So that team member shares with me kind of what the call was about, and I was like, huh? What? And initially my brain went into like legal ethics and compliance of legal ethics rules. And I thought, I don't feel like that's a good idea. But then I was like, well, if they're willingly, gonna come in, if they're willing to come in together, surely they would be willing to waive the possible conflict of interest that both, would cause. But the more I thought about it, I was like, the more confused I got, honestly, as to whether there was even a conflict of interest or not. I kind of feel like no, but I could be wrong. So I just had them waive the potential conflict of interest nonetheless. So anyway, fast forward a few weeks. Actually, let me back up. My team member called him back, got them scheduled. And now, fast forward a few weeks. So I'm flipping through my files for meetings that day and noticed that there are two files like rubber banded together. And I was like, what is this? And once I saw Joseph and Natalie, I was like, oh, this is that divorced couple that wants to do their estate planning together. So later that day, it's meeting time, and I was notified that they were in the conference room waiting for me. And as I approached the door, I kind of had this thought of, this could either go really well and be like a really cool thing and experience, or this is just going to go really bad, and I'm going to have to play referee and maybe even decline to represent them if it gets really bad. So I walk into the conference room and I'm greeted with like huge smiles. They're on the same side of the table. As when I get close to them, excuse me, as I get close to them, we introduce ourselves, sit down, and I said something like, well, this is a first for me. And we all had a little bit of a chuckle, then got down to business, and we started talking about, what they were trying to do. That they are divorced, they don't want to commingle or make anything joint right now, but they're both ready to do their estate plan, and since they're very separate individuals now, they want their estate plans to play nicely with one another. So if something happens to both of them, they want their plans to ultimately best support their 3 kids, Johnny, Susie, and Frankie. So the way my office works is that there's a first meeting, and it's more of like an introduction meeting. And we just sort of get to know each other. I kind of call it our blind date meeting. Who are you? Who am I? What are we doing here? And are we doing anything moving forward? But really what happens is we get to know each other, we hear their goals, share what options exist to accomplish those goals, etc. And usually, unless it's some sort of crisis, emergency type of estate planning, usually no decisions are made at that first meeting as who's in charge of healthcare decision, who's in charge of money, who's in charge of the kids, how do the kids inherit. That all occurs at the next meeting, the second meeting. So really that first meeting with Joe and Natalie, it happened. I shared with them my thoughts on options, and we got the second meeting scheduled to have them come back. So before they came back, I actually gave them a little tool that we have that helps clients prepare for some of the harder questions that I'm going to ask at the second meeting. So it's basically a tool that helps them analyze and decide their quote answers before the meeting. And for them, I really encouraged them on a few of the questions, not all, but a few of the questions, to get on the same page and even work on their answers together for those questions. So the second meeting happens. Joe and Natalie are there. They're still smiling and laughing like they were in the first meeting. In the back of my mind, I'm like, you guys seem to work together just fine, but to each their own. And so we dive into the questions and their answers. And they had jokingly shared that a few of the questions resulted in a little bit of a disagreement, but otherwise they got through it together in one piece, unscathed. I gave them kudos because if anything was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, it would have been them coming to an agreement on who got the kids, if something had happened to both of them, how the kids inherited, who managed it, the kids' inheritance. And that's when they shared the piece about there being a couple disagreements, but hey, World War III did not break out, so win-win. Decisions were made and World War III didn't break out, so there's our win-win. So to kind of go into how this plan got set up. So everything got signed, it all got set up. They both elected to do very simple revocable living trusts. And that way they could provide super specific instructions on how the kids inherited, or how the kids would inherit, I should say, how to keep things out of probate, and ultimately really just allowed them to, at that point, consolidate the kids' inheritances into one bucket each from their parents. So that way, say Johnny would not have a bucket from mom and a bucket from dad. Susie would not have a bucket from mom, bucket from dad. And Johnny would not have a bucket from mom, bucket from dad. Instead, Johnny gets a bucket that both mom and dads will dump into. So one bucket. Same with Susie, same with Frankie. So they just each get one bucket rather than them each getting 2. So their plans, are doing exactly what they wanted to do, right? As they shared in that very first meeting, where they did not want to join and commingle and combine assets now, but they really wanted just to collaboratively come up with a plan to support their kids. And rather than plan being a little clunky, so each kid getting 2 buckets, they just wanted things easy, and they wanted things to combine at that point. So that's how the kids ended up getting 1 bucket each. Their estate plans honestly kind of mirror each other. They put the same people as guardians of the kids if something happened to both of them. And that was one of their disagreements. They shared with me that Joe wanted his parents as guardians and Natalie wanted her parents as guardians. So they ended up figuring out a happy medium, a solution. But they also put the same people as the managers of the kids' inheritances. So that way, if something happened to them sooner than we really want to talk about, there's a really specific and staggered distribution based on age that the manager of the kids' inheritances would monitor, they would execute on, and they would just deal with. While they have the same people for roles that deal directly with their mutual kids, they do have different people for, say, like healthcare power of attorney and different people navigating financial and legal affairs if, just one dies or if one becomes incapacitated but the other is still living. So all in all, honestly, they should be so proud of themselves. I hope they happen to catch this episode because I am so proud of them for collaborating on an estate planning to put the kids first. And I'm honestly proud of myself for the work product that I created. And I, of course, 1,000,000,000% don't want anything to happen to them. That, if it does, then all this that we've talked about ends up happening. But you know what? If something does happen, their plans are set up so beautifully, which at the end of the day is peace of mind, right? And that is the whole purpose of estate planning. Joe and Natalie are perfect examples of estate planning and why actually doing an estate plan is so important. They're also a beautiful example of embracing a situation, taking the bull by the horns, and getting things done. They could have easily tried to do planning individually, and it would have been fine. It would have been doable. But this plan we have created is like chef's kiss. Their plan is like a Range Rover. Hang with me on my little example here. So doing a plan individually and without collaborating with one another would have been like a Honda Civic. That plan would have been dependable. It would have been fine. Nothing wrong. But the plan they chose, the Range Rover, is not only dependable, but it's more than fine. It is great. It is dang near perfect. Now, the use of that word perfect makes me a little uneasy, and it makes me think about something, which may be already going through in the back of your mind. What if either or both get remarried to new people? What if life changes? What if? And you know what? I'd actually venture to argue that something will change at some point. They are only in their early 40s, and ideally, they have a long life ahead of them. That long life may bring new challenges and different goals from an estate planning perspective. And in the event that something does happen, we just have to cross that bridge then. We deal with things then. We make adjustments and changes then. Through our meetings and conversations, they were super committed to reviewing things like annually at least. So reviewing assets and reviewing the documents and reviewing any changes in our lives. So long as they stay committed to that, any changes to their documents we'll be able to address. And not to mention, since I did both their plans, I'll be able to know when things need to change. Like if something changes over here, well, I'm going to need to change something over there. And, so long as they keep their number one goal in mind of putting their kids first and foremost, their estate plan will probably stay fine and dandy. But it's that maintenance and continued monitoring that is going to just is just critical. It just has to happen. So if you know of a couple like Joe and Natalie, or someone different than maybe, is divorced or separated, but should consider estate planning to mutually collaborate for kiddos, share this episode with them. This 16-minute episode could save them thousands of dollars in legal fees for messing up estate planning. It could save their family, their kids heartbreak and headaches for screwing up estate planning, and could decrease the likelihood of disagreements occurring down the road. Maybe something I say will help them when it's time to do their estate planning. Alrighty, my friends, it is time to wrap this episode up. I'm running out of time. I try to keep these capped out at 15-ish minutes. So a little sneak peek of next week. Next week's topic will be back to our current trends type of episode. And during that, it's going to be kind of fun. I'm going to be going into like step-by-step instructions, or maybe considerations is a better word, that, are you even ready for it? If you hit the lottery. And I jokingly say during meetings all the time, now, if you hit the lottery, do not tell anyone, just come see Jenny. And I'm actually totally serious, because like there's a very specific set of things that needs to happen. So I actually said that saying last week to a client. I was like, oh my gosh, I should totally talk about this on Legal Tea. So if anyone actually does hit the lottery, hey, they'll have my little Legal Tea episode as a resource. Not like this is probably going to land in their hands, but hey, maybe we'll try. Anyway, I will talk to you next week about that, my friends. Have a great week. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.